This is the actual front of the building. Although it is on the opposite side of Giriraj Govardhan, it faces east, and the whole building is built according to Shilpa Shastra, Vastu Shastra. It's 108 feet square on the outside. This is the major courtyard. The building is built in 3 courtyards, and the walls are between 2 and 3.5 feet thick, because it gets very hot here in the summer and it gets relatively cold in the winter. And this whole courtyard was completely derelict. It was completely derelict. There was no plaster in the walls, there was no flooring, there was nothing. And here we have the temple room. This is the temple room. This was also a completely derelict room. It had no floors, no wall. I mean, it was completely finished. And now we're just about ready to get your first darshan of Shri Krishna Balaram, our Govardhan Shilas that are the predominant deities of this place, and Giriraj Govardhan and Giri Govardhan. Now here we have the king's Bhajan Kutir. You can sit right in here comfortably, and you can see Giri Govardhan. There you go. See through the window? You can see Giri Govardhan. You can chant here and just meditate on Giriraj Govardhan. And this little room protects you from the elements. Has a nice breeze. You know, not too hot, not too cold. Perfect. Here to the right, you have Govardhan village. You may be able to see Haridev temple, the old temple that is flat on the top, the old sandstone temple. Manasi Ganga is just on the other side of that. So we're just that far from the village. And here is Govardhan. This is the Prikrama mark, where all the pilgrims come and take Prikrama, and we're situated right on the Prikrama mark. This is the maternity ward of the parrots. There's a hole right there in between where those branches are, and that's where they raise their children, the parrots. See, there's one right there. See? And they always surveil this place, and they make sure that no chipmunks or squirrels can get in, and they raise their kids. Sometimes we have as many as 50 parrots around, chirping and talking. It's nice. Really nice. Gives you the real flavor of Braj. This is for people who are into writing retreats, things like that, scholars maybe, right? And people who are into contemplative work, they can come and stay here for a while. Serious devotees. Oh, maybe somebody's sleeping in here. And this is the result of our authentic Govardhan Ashram, Ashram Prashad, right here. Convinced? He is. So these are the king's quarters. They're not the king's quarters anymore, but they're a guest room. It's the same as the other place you saw. There's a 10 by 10 room, and a larger room, and a bathroom. That's a suite. Very nice veranda. You can use this for sitting and having programs, or just talking about Krishna. And this is my room, office, library. The library, come room, come office, come meeting place, everything. This is where I do my work. Please forgive the fact that it is kind of messy. But we're in the middle of a festival. It's the first time we've done this, so you can see what you can see. That's it. Well, Gopi Puranadana and I have been friends for quite some time, and he visited the Govardhan project a few times. And in the course of our conversation, we became very friendly and close, I guess you could say. And he just asked me one day if I'd like to become his editor. I had told him that I was kind of like going in the direction of literary service. I wanted to go more in the direction of literary service. I was writing an article at that time for BTG, which was subsequently published. And he said he thought I could do it, judging from our conversations. And so I said, okay. And then that was about a year and a half ago, more than a year and a half ago. Then that summer, after that summer, it was very hot here, and I got sick. I got jaundice and kidney infection. And I went to Vrindavan to recuperate, and there Jayadvaita Maharaj came, and there was a conversation between Dravida and Jayadvaita Maharaj and Gopi Pranadhana, and they had me do a sample, and then Jayadvaita Maharaj, also was feeling inspired to get back into editing, and so he, kind of volunteered to teach me, more or less, how to edit. So I just found myself all of a sudden on this high-powered team.
This is a very suitable place to work on this book because Sanatana Goswami wrote the book here, just living by Govardhan Hill. So the whole team is staying, at least Keshav Bharati and Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu are staying at Govardhan Hill. I'm also sometimes coming. So the book is being produced at Govardhan. It's very appropriate.
If you look up in the Guinness Book of Records, Govardhan, at least at some time, I don't know if it's a recent, but it has the record for the highest recorded temperature for an inhabited place on the earth. So summer before last, it reached 57 degrees centigrade in the shade.
Actually, for all the 25 years I've been working with the BBT, I've always been shy to approach this juicy stuff, the Goswami literature. And I never seriously even looked at Brhad Bhagavatamrta until 4 years ago. But I was sitting in Moscow and they wouldn't let me out of the country. They wouldn't give me an Indian visa. So I had a month with nothing to do, and I just happened to have in my suitcase Laghu Bhagavatamrita by Rupa Goswami and then this book. So I read them both. I read the Laghu Bhagavatamrita first, and I was amazed. This is, of course I knew it was a deep, significant book, but it struck me that this is also very accessible. This is written for, not just for those who are already Rasika Paramahamsas, but it was written for a quite broad audience, general audience.
Srila Prabhupada, in his very last days, was asked whether the BBT should go on and publish other literature, new translations. And Prabhupada was very clear about that. It was one of the last questions that he was formally asked. And Prabhupada was very definite about it, that it's not that after I leave, then that's the end of publishing books. But he specifically said that yes, we have such great works left by our predecessors, and they should be translated and published.
In Srila Prabhupada's purports, Srila Prabhupada makes the statement more than one time, many times, that if you want to understand the Bhagavatam properly and be a serious student, then you have to read and study Brhad Bhagavatamrta by Srila Sanatana Goswami, Laghu Bhagavatamrta by Rupa Goswami, and Satsandarbhas by Jiva Goswami. So because that instruction is actually there in Prabhupada's purports, and the BBT has not translated these books yet, naturally devotees who have been reading Prabhupada's books for many, many years, they've been going out to find those books and read those books. And we're not always aware of the authenticity of the translation and the line, whether it goes back properly. So I personally think that this is a very, very important project, and the BBT should continue to make the literatures available that Prabhupada instructed us that we must read.
When I read in groups of devotees some sections from Brhad Bhagavatamrita, the first questions come up, devotees say, well, who translated the book? Where's the commentary come from? How do we know that it's bona fide? They want to know, why should I have confidence in this book? Do I want to listen to it? And so I spent some time talking about that first and answering those questions, and then devotees become very happy to hear The book is being translated by Gopi Pranadana Prabhu, who's been one of the senior members of our BBT Sanskrit department for many, many years. He began working in the BBT during Srila Prabhupada's time. He'd been a student at Columbia University in linguistics, and he joined Srila Prabhupada's movement and became a member of the Sanskrit department.
This book obviously has I can see that this book obviously had a very broad audience, and certainly every devotee in ISKCON, most are going to be fascinated with this book. Of course, there were other translations before Kushakwata Prabhu has done it. There's a Gaudiya Math edition by Yati Maharaj. But we have to discount, for our practical use, Yati Maharaj's version. The English is just unreadable. And Kushakwata Prabhu, he didn't translate the commentary, and the commentary really adds a lot to the book. So therefore, I suggested to the BBT that when they asked me, what do you want to do? I suggested this just offhand, because I just finished reading it, and it was an interesting book. And I got the go-ahead, let's do this. Doing it required, first of all, reading through the book, and studying Sanatana Goswami's commentary on it. That took me a couple of months. And then get down to work. I always read, when I have a translation and commentary, I like to go through a whole chapter, translate just the verses, and then go back and do the commentaries on top of that.
I'm not aware of any other published English translation. Of course, there are translations of just the verses. See, technically what you would say is the Brhad Bhagavatamrta are the verses, but then there's a commentary by Sanatana Goswami on his own work. I don't believe that there's another translation in the English of Sanatana Goswami's commentary. There are Bengali editions of his commentary, but nothing in English.
So there are some Bengali commentaries and translations rather, and maybe they're good, but I don't myself get too much into the translations. It's easier for me to read the original Sanskrit, for one thing, and the other is usually the translator takes a lot of liberty to present his own viewpoint and to elaborate, and usually cuts corners. The places where I would really could use a translation to help me is usually where they also give up and just skip around the same thing that I'm trying to puzzle over, or leave it in Sanskrit, unexplained. So I don't find much practical use in reading the Bengali translations. The editors, they can look at Kushakwata's and all the other available sources, but I'll just do it from scratch. It's easier for me to work that way.
Gopi Prabhu has understood Prabhupada's teachings, and he's very faithful to Prabhupada's teachings. He becomes uncomfortable when something is presented that's not in accordance with Srila Prabhupada's teachings. And at the same time, with the teachings of Sanatana Goswami, not that there's a conflict, they're concordant. If you have the realization, if you understand what Prabhupada's teaching, and if you understand what Sanatana Goswami is teaching, then they're concordant. The same thing is being presented according to the time and place. So he's faithful both to Sanatana Goswami and to Srila Prabhupada.
Practically, to get this work complete it was necessary for me to push almost everything else out of my life, at least for the long period that it took to complete the initial manuscript, about 2 years. My schedule then was very simple during that period. Chant my rounds, don't do anything else until they're done, and then sit down and translate all day. Now that we're done with the manuscript, I can spend a little time studying. If I had never studied anything on the side before this, I wouldn't have been prepared properly to translate this manuscript.
I get up at between 2:30 and 3:30, depending on what time I take rest. And I recite some prayers, then go to Mangalartik, chant my rounds, then have breakfast, and then I edit.
It's not at all an attempt to surpass Srila Prabhupada or to equal Srila Prabhupada, but just to serve Srila Prabhupada by carrying out his desires in this publishing of books.
I actually finished the translation back in June '99. Now we're in the editing phase. It's going slow, and it may be annoying to some that it's going so slow. I don't think Prabhupada is displeased, because actually the reason why it's going slow is that we have a big team. We've got Keshava Bharati Prabhu and Jayadvaita Maharaj, two major editors, and some other people looking at it too. So we're doing a very careful, thorough job of editing it, and especially when Jayadvaita Maharaj comes here to Govardhan, and when the three of us sit down together. Even though we've been editing the manuscript for months, at that point, especially when Jayadvaita Maharaj gives his contribution, and then we sit down, and read it through again carefully, sentence by sentence. Prabhupada must be pleased with it, because we discover ways of saying things right.
Another qualification that impresses me, or that gives me confidence in the book, is Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu's chastity, his fidelity to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada's philosophy, and Prabhupada's way of doing things.
Okay, this is a long book. It's got almost 2,700 verses in it, compared to the Bhagavatam, 18,000. So, there's two parts of the book, but it's convenient, like all the editions I have, not all the, this edition splits it into 3 volumes, because the second part is twice as long. There's 7 chapters in each part, but the second part, each chapter happens to be twice as long. It's got twice as many verses in it. So therefore we end up with 3 volumes. 3 volumes about Bhagavatam size, a little bigger than that. Okay, the book's not terribly hard to read, the language is not hard, but Sanatana Goswami manages to cover the whole ground of complete description of pure devotional service in the beginning up to the highest possible perfection of ecstasy.
As you know, Lord Chaitanya instructed most extensively Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami in the philosophy, science of Krishna consciousness.
What Sanatana Goswami is trying to do in this book is reach out and attract the conditioned souls. He's speaking to a modern audience, and he's presenting the glories from the point of view of someone who's absorbed in the special, complete surrender and ecstatic love for Krishna that the residents of Vrindavan have. He's trying to educate us in that special mood, simply by attraction, by attracting us to the personality of Krishna. But the way he does it is to present an entire panoply, an entire panorama of all the varieties of devotional service, beginning with how it's performed by just ordinary Brahmin or an ordinary king on the earth, how they worship the deity, simple deity worship, and then progressing all the way up throughout the planets of the universe, heavenly planets, planets of the sages, and then up through the coverings of the universe, how the Supreme Lord in many different forms and incarnations is being worshipped. And then entering Vaikuntha, and then finally reaching Goloka. It creates a great drama, a great sense of anticipation.
Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu understands Srila Prabhupada's conclusions, what he's teaching, and understands what Sanatana Goswami is saying. He reads the Sanskrit, he's a proper scholar, understands what's there in the book, and at the same time is following Sanatana Goswami by following Srila Prabhupada. He's not an upstart, as Prabhupada would sometimes speak about, so-called scholars who think they understand, who think they can. To actually understand this book, one has to enter by following in the footsteps of a bona fide spiritual master, bona fide acharya. So Gopi's doing the work in that humble spirit, and therefore it's a success, therefore it's wonderful to read.
The essence of Srimad Bhagavatam is rasa, or the taste of exchanges, emotional and relationship exchanges that go on between Krishna and his devotees. And devotee's incarnation. So the whole purpose of the Bhagavatam is to analyze the different relationships that different devotees have with Krishna and establish, the different moods and different relationships in detail. And it finally concludes, the conclusion of the Brhad Bhagavatamrta is that the gopis in Vrindavan have the most intimate and are the dearest devotees of Krishna. But it's so amazing because it does that without minimizing the relationships of any other devotees. So how the relationships with Krishna build and how they exchange love with Krishna in his different incarnations, and what are the differences, the subtle differences in moods, the subtle differences in the exchanges and the emotions that the devotees taste with Krishna. These are all analyzed in Brhad Bhagavatam.
A special feature of Brhad Bhagavatamrta is that the author, Srila Sanatana Goswami, has written his own commentary on the book. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada said that no one will understand, no one can comment better than the author himself. Just as Srila Vyasadeva has commented on his own Vedanta Sutra by writing Srimad Bhagavatam. So Sanatana Goswami has commented on Brhad Bhagavatamrta, has written his own commentary. So Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu is presenting his own commentary, which follows in the footsteps of Srila Sanatana Goswami. Sometimes he paraphrases, sometimes he quotes exactly, sometimes every now and then he adds something explanatory of his own to help us understand more clearly where we are and where we're going. So it's a very fine commentary, and it's a pleasure to read Sanatana Goswami's explanations. This word means this, and this word means that, and you can look at it this way, you can look at it that way. And the pleasure of reading the book is magnified many, many times over by by Sanatana Goswami's commentary. The commentary really makes the book.
So Srila Sanatana Goswami, he's written this book in two parts. And it seems to be completely disjointed, two separate stories that don't have anything to do with one another. Actually, the theme is one. In the first half, it's a story involving Narada Muni on a sort of playful search. I mean, he already knows all about this, but he's playing the pastime of looking for who really has Krishna's mercy, or who has the most of Krishna's mercy. And it starts off in Prayag, Allahabad, where he happens to be present in the crowd, observing a festival. And local Brahmin, respected Brahmin, just a person, local man, is worshipping the deity of Lord Madhava, famous deity in Prayag on Dashashmedha Tirtha, on the Ghat there, on the bank of the Ganga. The same place where Rupa Goswami heard instructions from Lord Chaitanya, a very holy place. Anyway, Narada Muni happens to be there, and he congratulates the Brahmin. You must be. You're putting on such a wonderful festival, and you're worshipping Krishna's deity so nicely. Obviously, you're such a pure devotee. You must be the best devotee of Krishna. And being an actual humble Vaishnava, this Brahmin denies this. And no, who am I? I have no facility. I am not empowered with the love of God. You want to see a real devotee, you should go down south, the South India, and see this king who's in this kingdom. He really worships Krishna real nice. And this is the beginning of Narada's trek throughout the universe. And he goes to the king in the south. He gets sent from him to visit, I think it's Indra in heaven. Indra sends him to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva sends him to everybody he goes to tells him, Narada praises the devotee. And then the devotee comes back and says, no, everything you say is untrue. I can defeat everything you told me. And you want to see a real devotee, the person who really has Krishna's mercy, go to this other person. In this way, Narada Muni gets sent from one great Vaishnava to another, comes to Dwarka, sees Krishna's intimate devotees in Dwarka and is told by them, if you want to see a real devotee, go find Uddhava. And he sees Krishna himself, and he hears from Krishna's own mouth the glories of the gopis of Vrindavan. In this way, he finally finds out, of course he knew it before, and most of the readers are going to know, even before they start the book, that the gopis of Vrindavan are the greatest devotees. That's no secret. In the end, Krishna, Narada says, Krishna, I want to hear it from you, from your own mouth. I've seen all this, I've met everybody, gotten their opinions. You tell me who you think is your greatest devotee. And Krishna just laughed at him and he said, Narada, don't you understand? That every one of them you've met, beginning with that Brahmin and that king, they're all my pure devotees. That I'm very satisfied by all of their services.
Sanatana Goswami he's so mature, so spiritually mature. There are verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita where Lord Chaitanya glorifies Sanatana Goswami, saying that he's so mature in his devotional service that he takes instruction from him what to do, what not to do. He took advice from him when he was planning on coming to Vrindavan, and he was, surrounded by millions of devotees. And Sanatana Goswami advised him, to go in a different way. He's the senior disciple of Lord Chaitanya, and he was given the most detailed instructions for the longest period of time to Sanatana Goswami. So, we know these things intellectually, but when you taste and hear his commentary on the analysis of the Bhagavatam, then it comes out. All these points come out.
Now the second half of the book brings in a whole different story. The central character is somebody else, Gopal Kumar. And he's just a young cowherd boy from Govardhan. He doesn't have any education. He doesn't know anything about spiritual life. He doesn't know anything about the material world. He never heard of heavenly planets, demigods. He doesn't know anything. But he was born in Govardhan. And he and the other boys knew this very saintly Brahmin who used to come and do his bhajan in the area. And they were very attracted to this gentleman. And he wanted to show this one boy, Gopal Kumar, his mercy. He seemed like a very nice boy. So he gave him this Gopal Mantra. And Gopal Kumar started chanting it. And this is the beginning of his adventures. He ends up on the power of chanting Krishna's mantra. He gets the power to fulfill his desires. Whatever he wants to do, he can do. So he ends up traveling throughout the universe. And everywhere he goes, he becomes a leader, even though he's just a cowherd boy from Govardhan. He goes to Indra's planet. And there, by circumstances, Indra gets in some trouble with someone's wife and has to hide out for a while. And they need someone to take Indra's post. And so they appoint Gopal Kumar, and he becomes king of heaven. And does a very good job of it. And then, like every other place he's staying, he doesn't feel exactly satisfied because he's really looking for Gopal, for his worshipable deity. And although the Lord is present on Swargaloka as Vamanadev, as Indra's younger brother, and so Gopal Kumar can have the association of Vishnu in the form of Vamana, but he's not fully satisfied. So he feels the desire to move on. And then he chants his mantra, and the benediction he got from his guru is whatever he wants while chanting, he'll get that. So he goes up to the planets of the sages. Then after that he goes up to Brahmaloka, and he becomes Lord Brahma and rules the whole universe. And then he goes beyond the material universe. He visits various shells of the universe. And finally he goes to Vaikuntha and meets Lord Narayan himself. Now they warn him when he gets there, the Vaikuntha Vasis. You've got to be careful. This is Vaikuntha. You have to approach the Supreme Lord properly. We'll tell you what prayers to say. and you stand properly in front of Lord Narayan. Don't twiddle your thumbs, and don't act silly in the presence of Lord Narayan. And they finally bring him in after telling him what to do and what not to do. They bring him in, they introduce him to Lord Narayan. And Gopal Kumar forgets everything they told him, runs up to Lord Narayan, "Oh, Gopal!" And tries to embrace Lord Narayan. They grab him before he can. And he's disappointed that, this is, as far as he's concerned, this is a worshipable Lord. But Lord Narayan doesn't want him to be disappointed. So he allows Gopal Kumar to entertain him by playing the flute, and so on. He spends a long time in Vaikuntha, and eventually he's ultimately elevated to Goloka Vrindavan and meets Krishna again. That's a brief summary of this second part. Sanatana Goswami is giving us the opportunity to learn how to understand and become attracted to the glories. The second half is called Goloka Mahatmya, the glories of Goloka Vrindavan. So we're trying to get this book, available back from the printer sometime around the middle of next year, 2000.
As far as how the book will be presented, so far the idea is that we will have color paintings, but not like a section of paintings in the beginning of the book, like we sometimes do in our publications. But we'll have paintings that are, how do you say this? Put into the book in the place where the paintings describe that part of the book. And we're toying with the idea also of having line drawings as well. And that's about all I can say. But it should be very, very interesting. Brahma Muhurta has got some very creative, fantastic ideas about how to present the book. And I'm sure that it's going to be powerful reading material, and it's going to be packaged very nicely.
Well, the other two volumes are right behind this one. Keshav Bharati's already started editing the second volume. It should proceed quicker than the first one because we've worked our methodology out at least. We've got a tight team. So, but it takes time. Maybe in a little more than a year we could finish the whole thing. Maybe.
As the last chapters of this book will show, the devotees who worship the Lord with such pure devotion achieve the highest possible success. They live forever in the world called Goloka, far above Vaikuntha, the official kingdom of God. There in Goloka, according to their pleasure, they freely enjoy the company of Lord Krishna, Sri Nanda Kishore. Srila Sanatana Goswami will fully present all these ideas as this narration unfolds. But first he invokes auspiciousness in this verse and the following 9 verses. So Sanatana Goswami was such a venerable personality, but not just in terms of scholarship and spiritual elevation, but also in terms of relationship with the residents of Braj. All the Brajbasis, they accepted him. Just now I don't remember the Hindi term or the Braj term that they gave him, but more or less it was like their father. They gave him a term that meant they accepted him as their father. He would deal with the Brajbasis and solve all kinds of problems, family problems, economic problems, agricultural problems, any problem, because he was, before, a minister in Hussain Shah's government. He was like a big guy. I mean, he would be like the Prime Minister of India becoming a devotee, full-on devotee. So he was so qualified. So when the residents of Braj, who already come for Guru Purnima to circumambulate Govardhan, it's already a big day. When they found out that Sanatana Goswami left his body on that day, they all voluntarily shaved their heads. Some of the women shaved their heads, and they kind of made a vow that they would come back, and they spread the word around, and it became the biggest day of circumambulation the whole year of Govardhan. And that's all in the strength of the relationship with Sanatana Goswami. Now this is the local, this is what the local people say.
In this second half of the Brhad Bhagavatamrta, Sanatana Goswami is trying to attract us and train us up, educate us in how to understand and be attracted to the glories of Goloka Vrindavan. And that's the title of the second half, Goloka Mahatmya. And the whole story is for that purpose. Both halves of the book are for that purpose, to attract us to the mood of devotional service in Goloka Vrindavan, also on the non-different Vrindavan on the earth, and to be attracted to Krishna, who was the center of that, was the Vishaya, the focus of that devotion. And this book is called Brhad Bhagavatamrta, which means it's proposed that this book, by the author, that this book is presenting the distilled essence of what the Bhagavatam contains. That this is a summary. The Bhagavatam is a very big book, and this in a briefer form is the essential message of the Bhagavatam.